Okay, thank you everyone for dialing in for our fifth and final Active Transportation Plan Steering Committee meeting. I'm excited to see everyone here today. Um, so I'm Taylor Laurent, the project manager for our Active Transportation Plan, and we have our team here on the line as well to present the results of our work. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Catherine, and she'll walk us through the results.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Taylor. So we've got a lot to cover today. Do have lots of opportunities where I'm just going to pause, see if there's any questions. But overall today we'll provide sort of a project recap. We started this a little over 18 months ago, and we've accomplished a lot. And sometimes we kind of look back and like, wow, we accomplished a lot. So we just want to make sure that we remind you of all the things that we've done, where we started. The public feedback results, going into what types of feedback we received, review the final network, how we prioritize projects, give you just an overview of the plan. We sent that to you all a couple weeks ago, so hopefully you've had a chance to take a quick peek, and then we'll just wrap up with some next steps. So to jump in, we started this project in late 2022, and we're expecting to wrap everything up here in the next couple of months. And as Taylor mentioned, this is our fifth and final steering committee. So after we incorporate feedback that we receive from you all into the report, we'll be sharing it with all of the various committees in April and then going to the board in May. So I'll start off with just some highlights of the last 18 months. In October 2022, we kicked off the project with the CAC-TAC workshop to introduce the project and confirm the existing and planned active transportation system throughout the region. We received lots of great feedback that was used to refine our mapping, and sort of the feedback of things that had since been constructed since some of the original mapping was done, and then feedback on new things that were planned throughout the region. So that way we were starting with a pretty good idea of what was already on the system and what everybody had planned. We then had our first steering committee meeting in November 2022. So we spent some time during that first meeting to get to know each other, reviewed what we expected from the plan and the overall role of Metro Plan Orlando. We also reviewed the key project tasks, the schedule, public engagement strategies. We also wanted to understand your perspectives on the most challenging aspects of the project so we could keep those in mind, as well as key outcomes that you all wanted to see from the process. So we've been keeping that all in mind as we've been progressing and identifying different strategies, projects, and policies. And then your definitions of a better walking and bicycling system are also shown here, with connected, safe, and separate from vehicles being really key components of that system. After our first steering committee, we then surveyed the public to understand when and where people walk and bike in the region and what barriers they have. We asked people where they currently walk or bicycle, with respondents able to select from a multitude of options shown here on the screen. Most people reported walking or bicycling for fun, recreation, exercise. About half the respondents reported biking for some walking trips, and about 40% walk for shopping trips. About 15% of the respondents walk or bike to transit, and about 12% walk to school with children. And then another 20% or so reported biking to work, and about 8% reported walking to work. So as compared to the regional commute mode share, our survey respondents seem to skew towards people really interested and able to use active transportation facilities in the region. There was also an opportunity for people to provide map-based feedback and identify where they felt unsafe walking and biking and where they might like to see new facilities. At our second meeting, we provided preliminary level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort analyses. We also presented highlights of the policy review we conducted for all agencies within the Metro Plan region. There was also a robust discussion of bicycle and pedestrian facility type naming conventions that could better connote to the general public the potential level of conflict between other roadway users and overall comfort and separation and protection from vehicles. And a lot of the same sentiments shared by the steering committee were also echoed in the public feedback on the visual preference survey regarding the type of facilities they would feel most comfortable using. So this feedback informed the basis of some updated bicycle facility naming conventions that we used in the plan. So here's just some images of those facility types included in the plan. So just wanted to note that for sidewalk facilities, there's a wide sidewalk category. And in some jurisdictions, these are also classified as trail facilities. And then for trail facilities, there's two main types. So a shared use path designation, which is entirely separated from vehicle travel, except at crossing locations. And then side paths, which typically parallel roadways. And while vehicle conflicts are minimized, there may be driveways along the facility. And then there's 4 different types of bike lanes that we identify in the plan. So the first is your standard on-street painted bike lane, typically 5 feet wide. And then the wide bike lane designation adds a painted buffer, so making it probably around 7 feet. And then with a separated bike facility, there's some separation between the bike facility and the travel way, but it may not be sort of a physical separation. And then with a protected bicycle facility, there's a physical barrier between the bike lane and the vehicular travel lane, just to add that additional level of protection. Once we'd confirmed the location and type of walking and bicycling facilities, we then completed the existing conditions assessment, including reviewing all the public feedback and incorporating that. So we documented the existing bicycle level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort, conducted an accessibility analysis, and then evaluated how the currently planned active transportation system in the region would fare as well under the LTS and accessibility metrics. So I'll just share a couple of those highlights. So the results here are shown for the MPO roadway network plus the off-street shared use trails. So about 22% of overall facilities are a level of traffic stress 1, meaning very comfortable. About 5% are LTS2. Again, those are comfortable for most people, maybe not all people. And then we start to get to the less comfortable facilities. So about 15% are LTS3, and then almost 60% are LTS4. So meaning very uncomfortable for most people. Let's see. And then we also did the same analysis for the pedestrian level of comfort. And so for the LTS1, that also includes the shared use paths, side paths. And so if you exclude those facilities, less than 7% of roadways have a pedestrian level of comfort score of 1, meaning very comfortable for people walking. And then about 25% of roads on the federal aid network don't have any pedestrian facilities at all. But you can see that for most of those roadways, they're in very sort of rural areas, and they're sort of roads without sidewalk, typically those 2-lane rural roads, and agricultural or very low density areas. So once we had the level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort results finalized, we completed a draft accessibility assessment for the existing condition as well as the future conditions. So just a reminder, this is not assessing what facilities are compliant with Americans with Disability Act, but rather defining how accessible specific destinations are via a low stress network of walking and bicycling facilities. So this travel access component relates to the number of destinations a person can get to within a certain period of travel time for walking and biking. So for walking, it was really, how far can you walk in about 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and 30 minutes. And then for bicycling, it was those same time periods. But if you're biking, you can go a lot farther. So key data inputs are the various land uses that we use. So looking at schools, transit stops, including links and Sunrail stations, parks, shopping destinations, and jobs. And so then it was really looking at accessibility to all those places from residential uses. And then we layered on top of that the level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort. And so then a travel access score was calculated for each of these travel sheds. And so where multiple travel sheds overlap, then those roadways would receive a higher score. So you can see on this graphic here, just kind of an example of how some of those travel sheds would overlap. And this is just showing the walk shed for schools. And then you can layer on top of that walk sheds for transit and other types of land uses to really see how many different types of destinations are accessible. And then here's just an example of the results for bicycling. So a higher level of accessibility was assigned for shorter travel times. And then a separate score was developed for each of those destination types and then layered on top. So the calculations assume that each of the destination types is equally important. And then we correlated the level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort to the analysis as well. So on this map here, the turquoise roads are ones that are considered low stress for bicycling, meaning an average LTS of 2 or better, and high access, meaning that there's lots of different types of places within a short distance. And then conversely, the orange roads on this map are ones that are relatively uncomfortable, but there's still a lot of places to access. So these maps and these analyses were used to help us identify where in the region we might want to think about new facilities. And then from this, we also evaluated the underlying demographics. So for example, at the regional level, there were 317 public schools, and then 71 of them, or 22%, were accessible within a 15-minute low-stress walk. And then in transportation disadvantaged communities, there's about 85 schools, and only 5 of them, or 6%, were accessible within a 15-minute low-stress walk. And so these underlying demographic factors were also used in the prioritization process, and lots more details in the report. So once we'd completed the existing conditions analysis, we started to identify potential projects through a data-driven process where we considered roads with higher motor vehicle speeds, where pedestrians and bicyclists could benefit from separated or dedicated facilities, roads with a high rate of bicycle or pedestrian crashes per mile, or fatal bicyclist or pedestrian involved crashes, intersections where trails cross a 6-lane road, and then also intersections where there was a high rate of pedestrian bicyclist crashes or a fatal crash. We also looked at utility rights of way, really keeping in mind feasibility and including factors such as ownership and proximity to sensitive land uses. We also then looked at gaps in the bicycling and walking networks, and then the facility comfort and access. So we shared some of our preliminary project ideas during our 4th steering committee back in July of 2023. And also during that meeting, we shared a toolbox of strategies. So these were strategies identified in 4 different categories, including bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, transit access, and then safety and comfort. So these strategies were developed through the lens of safety, equity, inclusion, health, connectivity, and comfort, and then organized by these 3 broad categories with specific information about the different strategies provided. So your feedback from the steering committee meeting was incorporated into the draft final document and included in the report. We also shared some major policy additions, including some related to ADA compliance, active transportation count programs, and micromobility regulations. So the draft final document also includes that policy language, as well as some related to bicycle facility selection. We also discussed the prioritization criteria at the 4th steering committee, and we'll have some additional details on that a little later on. And then after we incorporated your feedback into the materials at the 4th meeting, we had our 2nd CAC-TAC workshop where we collected more feedback on the proposed project. So at the workshop, we had boards for each county showing existing and planned on and off-street facilities, the critical sidewalk projects, and then the draft of the 2050 ATP projects. We had a lot of handouts with some key information, and then we had lots of things in a web map as well, where folks could provide comments, and then also a web map with a host of supplemental data so people could really kind of see the work that went into identifying different facilities and some of those underlying assumptions. And then after the workshop, we provided agencies with an additional 2 weeks to provide feedback on the initial list. And then once we incorporated all that initial feedback, we had some follow-up discussions. And then that final list was shared with the public. So that initial project list was over 400 projects. And then following the public agency review, we eliminated some projects and then some new projects were added. For most of the projects that were eliminated, the feedback that we received really demonstrated that either the already planned project that we'd hoped to make a little better was too far along in the project development process to make any changes, or the project, once we learned some additional details, really already met the purpose and need of the ATP, so there was no need to add that as a new project. So before we transition to share the feedback from the public in the final network, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions.
No questions here. Great stuff.
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Catherine.
No.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So for the month of October, we solicited feedback from the general public on the draft final project list. So we pushed out ads, or Metro Plan staff pushed out ads through various social media platforms, and also collaborated with the public information officers in local jurisdictions to share information on how to participate through their networks. And people provided some very specific and detailed responses. Some feedback was very specific to a particular location and actually helped inform a number of new projects. And then others were just more general in nature, such as providing improved bus service or improved access to transit. And then a number of comments were more related to transportation safety. So those were passed along to the various project teams working on the local Vision Zero action plan, so they can be incorporated into those planning efforts. So in total, we received 444 comments from about 165 unique users, with responses from Orange County overrepresented. So we also observed that the majority of responses came from mobile devices, showing that online activities really need to be designed for sort of mobile devices to provide a high level of response. And then for people from outside the region who responded, most are residents in adjacent counties who travel to the region frequently. So as I mentioned, based on the public feedback, we added 14 new projects to the list. And then while we were doing that round of public engagement, we sent out the draft final project list in a tabular format for one last review by all the agencies as well, to really confirm all the various details and to start noting their local priority. And then all this feedback was used to develop the final active transportation plan projects. So once we incorporated all that feedback, we ended up with 256 projects that are included in the active transportation plan. And this is in addition to all the previously planned projects into the region. So we separated these into new projects and project enhancements. So new projects include new trail segments, new trail crossings, intersection improvements, corridor projects. And on the screen here, we have a summary of those 148 new projects. And then here's a summary of the 108 enhancements to already planned projects. So these enhancements include opportunities as part of an already planned project to improve facilities for people walking and bicycling, such as narrowing a travel lane and widening a bicycle lane, doing a resurfacing project, or if a roadway is being widened, providing a side path instead of on-street bike lanes or in addition to on-street bike lanes, co-locating transit stops with protected crossings, and incorporating crossing treatments. So the next few slides show here the regional network that we've developed. So these maps are also provided in the draft report as figures 1 through 5, starting on page 3 of the report. So this map here shows all of the currently planned facilities in the region, as well as the 2050 active transportation projects by project type. So you can see there's a lot happening in the region, a lot of projects. And then here is the map for Orange County, which is shown as figure 2. Here's the inset portion of Orange County, which is shown as figure 3 in the report. And then here's Osceola County with insets for Kissimmee and St. Cloud, and this is included as figure 4. And then this is the Seminole County network shown as figure 5 in the draft report. So once we had the network, we wanted to evaluate its performance. So we then looked again at level of traffic stress, pedestrian level of comfort, and accessibility. So the level of traffic stress analysis was then conducted for all the roadways in the region, with the results shown here for the MPO roadway network plus the off-street shared use trails. So incorporating the length of side paths and shared use trails, about 44% of the facilities with implementation of the already planned projects plus the 2050 ATP projects, those will be level of traffic stress 1. And that's sort of almost doubled from existing conditions. And then about 4% will be level of traffic stress 2. So that's about the same as the existing condition. 11% will be a level of traffic stress 3. That's compared to about 15% in the existing condition. And then we'll still have about 40% of facilities at a level of traffic stress 4. But compared to the existing condition where that's about 60%, that's a pretty big improvement. We're also seeing that the miles of shared use paths and trails would increase from about 157 miles to 215 miles between the existing and the active transportation plan condition. And then for side paths, these are designed to trail standards but adjacent to roadways. That would increase from about 145 miles to about 800 miles for roadways that are on the federal aid network. And then for all roadways in the region, that number would increase from about 330 to over 1,800. So those are pretty impressive gains on more comfortable facilities within the region. And then there's about a 20% increase in the number of roadways where the LTS improves from a 3 to a 4 to a 1 or a 2. And then also just wanted to note that very few new roadways in the region are planning or being planned with on-street bike lanes. And instead, most of those new roadways are opting to provide separated bicycle facilities as side paths instead. We did the same analysis for the pedestrian level of comfort. We see some pretty similar results with the number of miles of level of traffic stress 1 facilities doubling. The LTS2 facilities increases slightly. And then with the number of miles of the pedestrian level of comfort 3, 4, and 5 decreasing pretty significantly. So we see lots of gains in improving the comfort of facility types for walking and biking. We also evaluated accessibility changes that resulted from development of the planned and ATP projects. So again, this was conducted based on 15 and 30-minute walking and bicycling sheds. And then to qualify as a low stress walk or bike ride, the route needs to have an average level of traffic stress or pedestrian level of comfort or 2 or better. So just want to point out that at the very, very local level, there might be some uncomfortable sections on routes, but overall it's a comfortable route. So we can see here that walking and bicycling accessibility on low stress networks to all land uses in the region is expected to improve. And all the details are in the report, and I'll just highlight some of the key findings here. So we can see that access to transit for people bicycling increased by the largest percent, but really part of that large increase is that currently so few transit facilities are accessible by a low stress 15-minute bike ride in the existing condition. But it does go from about 63 transit stops in the existing condition to over 800 in the active transportation plan condition. So some pretty big increases there. And then a couple other key highlights. So over 50% of schools, transit facilities, parks, jobs, and shopping opportunities would be accessible via a low stress 15-minute walk in the future with implementation of the planned projects and the ATP projects. And then bicycling accessibility would also increase, but at a slightly lower rate than walking accessibility. And this is partly because the distance that can be traveled within a 15-minute bike ride is much longer, and there are some barriers created by large roadways. We also noted that while accessibility would improve throughout the region, the accessibility gains are lower in transportation disadvantaged communities. The number of schools accessible within a 15-minute low stress walk would increase from about 28% in the current condition to over 60% with the in the ATP condition. And then bicycling accessibility would increase pretty significantly as well. We see some pretty large gains for job accessibility in the future. And then job accessibility is expected to be slightly better in transportation disadvantaged communities as compared to the regional average. And then access to shopping centers about doubles, as well as access to transit facilities. And then let's see, there's some modest gains for bicycling access sheds with parks remaining some of the most accessible land uses in the region for bicycling. And then the accessibility and comfort analyses were used as prioritization factors to help identify different projects to move forward with first. So that was a lot of information. So I'll pause here to see if there's any questions.
Catherine, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Yeah, no
Okay,
questions here. Pretty comprehensive.
great. All right. So jumping into the prioritization categories, we started with taking a look at what had been used in the 2045 MTP, the recent prioritized project list, and then the critical sidewalk gap projects to help identify criteria. And so really criteria that have been used relate to safety, reliability, access, connectivity, health, and the environment, investment, the economy, and equity. And so based on our review of the detailed metrics, not all of them really applied to the active transportation projects. So based on the goals of the project, as well as guiding principles of safety, equity, inclusion, and health, connectivity, and comfort, we identified 4 quantitative criteria and then 2 qualitative criteria that we all considered. And so these are all detailed on table 11 of the draft report, with sort of a lot of details on how each prioritization criteria was applied. And then the overall weighting of each category shown here is based on the feedback that you all provided to us at the 4th steering committee meeting. So taking all of the projects and the metrics of each of them, we prioritized all of them, and each project was assigned a score. So the table here shows the top 10 new projects, and then just wanted to note that the regional impact and jurisdictional significance scores have not yet been assigned. So right now the total score is out of 80, and then the full prioritized needs list is provided in the draft report. And then just also wanted to note a few of the projects ended up with very low scores. And part of that was those projects were really added outside of the data-driven process that was used to identify projects that would result in the highest accessibility and safety gains across the region. But yeah, you can see that a lot of projects scored pretty high out of the initial 80 points that were assigned. All right, and then I'll just do a high-level overview of the report. So in case you have not reviewed it yet, there's lots of information in there. So
Catherine,
we've organized, yes. Oh, it looks like
before you get
Josh.
too far, we have Joshua has his hand raised with a question.
Thank you, I appreciate it. With the prioritization that you had on the previous slide, is there, and maybe this is more of a MTP question slash answer, but is there a way of how they're spreading, how the priorities are spread kind of evenly potentially across the different counties? I'm noticing there's it looks like
Yeah.
just a
Catherine,
couple that might
I'll
be
take this
possible.
one. Yeah, so this is just the top 10 as a sample, Joshua, just to give an idea of how things are scoring with the current methodology. This methodology for the active transportation plan does not take into account jurisdictional spread. This is looking at highest needs. This is a bit of a preview for what comes at the end of this presentation, but as we take this needs list of active transportation projects throughout the region, and we take it forward into our long range plan. That's where we'll kind of reassess if there's any additional fine tuning needed. Now that we've put a lot of work into this, it shouldn't need too much, but we'll have those discussions about when and where and which projects will be funded over the next 25 years.
All right, thanks.
Catherine, I'll give it back to you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
The one time I didn't pause for questions. Okay, so the report overview. So there's really sort of three main sections of the report plus the technical appendices. Our goal was to have the report itself be fairly streamlined, really just highlighting some of the key findings from all of the different analyses. And then a lot of the details will be in the technical appendix. So within the existing conditions section of the report, we go ahead and define the facility types, the existing network with the level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of comfort results, and the accessibility results. For the network development, really sharing what the planned network is, the analytics that went into developing the project network, how we refine the projects, the ATP toolbox, and then all of the future analyses. And then we wrap up the report with just a description of the prioritization criteria and process within that prioritized needs list, as well as the summary of policy recommendations, and then a host of details in the technical appendix. So at this point, we've sort of done a big overview of everything that we've done, and we'd love to just get any last feedback. So after this meeting, we'll resend a link to the report, as well as reiterate the list of how to provide feedback. But we have put together a brief survey. There's some very quick questions that you can answer. So if you don't have time to read all the details of the report, you can still provide feedback. There are some options to include some pretty detailed feedback on the survey if you would like, but that's not a requirement. If you want to provide handwritten feedback on printed out pages of the report, that's great. You can email them to us. You can add comments to the PDF itself, or you can give Taylor a call. And we just ask that you provide all of your feedback by March 21st. And then we'll share this again on the screen. So we'll just wrap up with next steps, and then we'll open it up to see if there's any additional questions or discussion. So yeah, just wanted to highlight again that we need to have all your feedback by the 21st. We do intend to make the final report document 508 compliant, and that does take a little bit of time. So any comments received after the 21st may not be incorporated into the final document. And then Taylor's just going to provide a little overview of how this is all going to be incorporated into the MTP and what those next steps are.
Thank you, Catherine. So I hinted about this a little bit earlier, but we have begun our 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, so our long-range planning process and vision for the growth of our region and the transportation services that we'll need to support our population in 2050. So that's why this active transportation plan had that horizon year of 2050. So this could flow directly into that long-range planning process. So we're going to take these active transportation plan recommendations and directly incorporate them into this long-range planning process. And just kind of as I hinted at earlier, as we bring these in with all of our other needs that are identified through the region, whether they're roadway, safety, transit, a couple other items, we'll bring all of those together and develop a holistic group of projects or vision for each corridor so we can make the most efficient use of the funding and resources that we have available to make the biggest impact on transportation within our region. So if you do want to learn more about that, we do have additional information up on our website, and I've got the link here on the slide for everyone. But there will be more to this work effort, as even though we're wrapping up the active transportation plan now, it's going to be continued moving forward into our 25-year plan. And Catherine, if we can go to the next slide. or I guess I'll pause here. Does anyone have any questions about those next steps before I open it up for public comment? And I'm not.
This is
Mhm.
Josh. Sorry, I lost the button for the raise hand, so I apologize for that. But I was just wondering, I was going to ask if there was an email that was going to be sent out. I just came across it that was sent out February 23rd. So would you be able to send out maybe another reminder email?
Mhm.
Just a secondary reminder to do final comments. Make sure we don't miss those.
Yes. So right after this meeting, Catherine will be sending out another email kind of with a direct link to the reports. That way, if it's gotten lost in the inbox, it's right back up to the top. And it will also include a link to the survey, that Mentimeter survey that was up on the screen a little bit ago. So those include some focusing questions. If you don't feel like typing everything out in an email, you could respond to the survey to also provide your feedback.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Then Paul, you're recognized.
Yeah, I just wanted to squeeze in a question here before we went to the public comments about the transit. Catherine, you mentioned on one of the other slides, and I waited till the end here just in case the answer was brought up somehow in the middle of the presentation. We went from 63 to 800 more accessible transit stops. Can you speak a little bit more about what that main deficiency was? As you know, our goals are exactly the same, and being in modal development, that's a huge number. So I'm just wondering, was this mainly just improved facilities? Did we have quite a few stops without facilities? Additional
Yeah,
info,
it's
great.
mainly, improving just general walking and biking facilities. So the number that went up so significantly, that was for bicycling access. And right now in the region, there's a lot of really great places where you can go for a short ride on a comfortable facility, but it's when you're trying to get a little farther, it's more difficult. And then, as you know, a lot of the transit stops are on 6+ lane roadways that currently are not very comfortable at all.
Right.
And a lot of the improvements really do make some of those roadways and some of those intersections much more comfortable. So improving that the comfort to a lower stress route.
Okay, gotcha. So we probably just use transit stops within proximity of some of these identified improvements.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and so
awesome.
that's out of, I think there's over 4,000 transit stops that were included in the analysis.
Yeah.
So some pretty big gains there, which is exciting to see.
Thank you. That's cool to hear. Thank you.
And we did receive a comment in the chat. Patrick Panza, he said he had to leave a little bit early for another meeting, but the report and appendices were a great read and shows the hard work that's gone into this process. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this group. So that was a little bit of excellent feedback. Thank you, Patrick. Then do we have any other questions from our steering committee members or items that we want to discuss before I open it up for public comment? Okay, seeing no hands raised. Catherine, can you take us back to the public comment slide? So if there's anyone here from the public who would like to have a question or make a comment, this would be the time to use the raise your hand feature here in Zoom, or dial *9 if you're on the phone so you can be recognized. When you are recognized, if you could state your name and address and give your comment within 2 minutes. Okay, as I'm saying this, I'm being reminded that there are no attendees on the public side, so that keeps this really simple, but still need to go through the process to make sure that we're being fully accessible as part of these meetings. So we can just kind of step forward, Catherine, in the presentation.
I think that was it. So we'll just leave it up on the screen in case folks still needed to jot down the Mentimeter code. And as Taylor mentioned, I'll send an email after this call with a link to the report, a link to the Menti, and just reminders on how to provide feedback. And then I'll provide just a reminder one a couple days in advance of the 21st. Just so it gets to the top of your email. there's no additional questions, then I think we can wrap it up a little early.
Mhm. Thank you, everyone, for your time and participation with the steering committee meeting, and we look forward to seeing your thoughts and comments on the final plan.
Yeah, ditto. Thank you guys for
Thank you. Bye.
the effort.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks so much.
Thank you.